you want to get a hold of myself or Nori, you can go to Broadcast Team Alpha and send us a message, and we'll get the message and we'll get back to you. And by the way, if you are at Broadcast Team Alpha, get into the picture gallery. Lose yourself in there because there are 5,000 pictures of incredible things that should not exist, but it does. And it's going to be fun once you get in there. And if you are watching on YouTube right now, that's the place to be because that's the only place that we are monitoring the chat room. And a lot of other places, they don't have chat rooms, and some that do, but we can't be more than one place at a time for right now, but we're working on it. Any click the bell and subscribe, and that will help us a lot. So I also want to mention to you, for those that is on a spiritual journey and trying to better yourself, Nori and I put together a spiritual think tank. We do incredible things in there. We um, we have discussions. We see some videos once in a while, and we. It seems like we create out of seemingly nothing sometimes. We bring healing almost instantaneous sometimes, or something that in a day or two problems are gone. Windfall in economics happens, and knowledge. You really should send us an email. Come and check it out and see if this is something that you want to be part of because this is bigger than ourselves. So send an email to themastermindconnection@gmail.com. Themastermindconnection@gmail.com. And I'm going to introduce the guest to you. So here, this is going to be fun. We have Sperry Andrews with us. I have known Sperry for probably, gosh, what do you think, 15, 20 years or something like that? We have, shared some information and different things. And I want to say a few things about him because he's an incredible mind. He's an author, he's a lecturer, he's a teacher. And in 1990, he formed the Human Connection Institute. And he has spoken at hundreds of groups over these last 40 years, including teaching and research into distant mental interaction with living structures. I'll translate that for you. That's telepathy between people and living structures, including animals. Now, he's spoken of at University of Connecticut, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, World Business Academy, Duke University, Berkeley, plus many others, including the United Nations. And folks, you don't speak at the United Nations unless you got something on the ball. So that is an honor, and I'm really honored to have him here. So welcome to the show, Sperry.
Thank you so much, Aage. Wonderful to be here. Hello to everybody out there, and great to be with you.
This is going to be fun. We had a talk last night. We talked for over an hour, and I think I have figured out a few things about how the universe works. But last night was an education for me talking to you because you have done so much. You are working with a theoretical physicist, a scientist, and you're probably learning a lot from him too. So this is going to be for the listeners out there. Lend him your ear because what you're going to hear tonight, you're going to find pearls in it that make sense to you and you want to adapt in your life. So I want to start out with just a quick question and maybe twofold. Now, you told me last night you have memories or recollections of coming from an eight-dimensional existence here to Earth for a specific purpose. So, in that, let me ask you, who is Sperry?
Well, the word who can be interpreted various ways. I
Maybe
would
what?
say it could be interpreted various ways. What I what I would say is that there really is only one of us, and many have said so over thousands of years. There's only this unity, which is really the observer or the witness, and we're each utilizing this ability to unite space and time, energy, matter, mind, and body in a unique way, uh, individually and also indivisibly. If we're telepathic together, interpersonally, we can share a commonly sensed consciousness. Or if we have 8 billion humans on this planet Earth being awake as one, we have global enlightenment. And that is what I've been focused on my entire life.
And both in you and me are just one part of the whole as one. That
Well, in the
makes
same
sense.
way, I mean, we know, as a matter of fact, that we have about 50 trillion human cells and nearly 10 to 20 times as many bacterial cells making up each one of us. So 450 trillion cells, let's say, are collaborating together this moment to make each one of us. My friend, dear friend Bruce Lipton says, we're like cells in the body of the earth. And when we can come together as one consciousness, we can speak to other civilizations in our universe with a single voice from our collective telesomatic intelligence. And other civilizations who are much more collectively conscious, and we can talk about those here today, because I have familiarity with other civilizations other than Earth civilization. Uh, they
Yeah,
uh, they can talk as a civilization with us as a civilization. And this is something that Bruce Lipton has foreseen going back maybe 15 years or something. So uh, this is something we can all realize and grok together.
yeah, and that is what you are doing with the Human Connection Institute. When you go and speak to a group, you synchronize the group into one unit. And that is such a brilliant idea, and then you figure out how to do that.
Well, it took me about 20 years of contemplation when I was quite young. Uh, and at one point, I was sitting in a closet for about a couple of years, just not knowing what to do, how to bring this about. And finally, it came to me that if I had people simply point with their words to awareness, where awareness is really something ubiquitous or fundamental to each and every moment of every one of us, that when a group would become aware of awareness together, we would become awake together. And our minds, what I discovered was our minds would go silent. And we'd be in because a group of us, by being aware of awareness, it would be as though each one of us had been meditating for many, many, many hours or even days. And the mind would go silent, which ordinarily would take a lot more meditative, contemplative focus to happen for us individually, meditating separately. So the combined awareness of a group becoming aware of that awareness that we all were sharing brought everybody into this state of no mind, no self, and we felt we're part of the inanimate world and each other indivisibly, and we felt like we were part of a planetary consciousness, if you will. Ultimately, in some cases, a sense there was a sense of us sharing a cosmic consciousness. And it seemed quite evident that this was the direction or progression of human consciousness towards this collective awakening at a cosmic scale.
Yeah. So when you did these meetings and people kind of joined minds together under this higher consciousness thinking or nothingness, if you like, they were able to feel each other, maybe as one more so than they otherwise would.
You think about when, let's say, we hold a child to our heart and we feel the child feeling us, feeling them, feeling us, feeling them. And
Yeah.
when we have this sense of sharing a common body, heart, and mind, uh, one way of saying it is sharing undivided attention, is actually experientially seems indistinguishable from unconditional love, where there's no, we are one love, one consciousness, one heart, one body, one mind, one soul, one spirit. And there is this synergy between the child and us, let's say, and we feel the love of the child and our love as one love, and the child is lifted into our love as are we lifted into our love, the greater love that we're able to feel together. So when you get a group of people doing this, where we're sharing undivided attention and we enter into this state of being one body, heart, and mind, one love, it's really quite astounding. It's not like, pawing over each other or something like that. It's more like being lit up and turned on. The mind goes silent so that we're able to feel everything with all that we think and feel and sense, and each other feels and thinks and senses and intuits. We're able to experience as if we were sharing a greater body, heart, and mind together.
Yeah.
That state of collective telepathy.
There you go. Telepathy, that's a subject I want to mention later on. But I would say when you're doing this, it feels like the conscious, well, it sounds like the consciousness of the people is rising. So they have more of a spiritual awareness once they start seeing the surroundings and what is going on around them. They have more of a spiritual look at things, feel the more spiritual value in what is out there. And that is, I see people are waking up in hordes like right now on things like this, which didn't used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we are going through a process. And I really want you to comment on this because something incredible happened in South America, some, I don't know, about 800 to 1,000 years ago. And the Incas, a lot of the Native Americans down there, they just disappeared. And they found the tools laying right there, whatever they were working on, they walked away from it or they disappeared. There were even half pots of food sitting that was not eaten. And they don't
Yeah.
do that. So they disappeared. Could that have been some type of an ascension into a higher reality where they were no longer physically visible? Could that be something that we are going through now? Do you think?
Well, we know from Michael Sala's work in exopolitics, interviewing people, that there's this discovery of these space arcs where people were lifted right off the planet, beamed right up by
Yeah.
Scotty, of course,
Yeah.
to his craft. And
I like him.
there is, going back a couple thousand years, in India, for example, there was a lot of extraterrestrial activity, even space wars going on. And it seems that since the ETs can appear and disappear in different time zones, like they're just hopping around, going to the grocery store, only they're going backwards and forwards in time, that they have seeded all the various religions with this potential that we have to be in communion with them, to be communion with each other. Uh, but we were in a fairly primitive state as humans, probably being tinkered with biologically so that we could buy, apparently, best guess that Corey Good and others have found were there are about 22 different races that have been tinkering with us. It said with Linda Moulton Howe's work, who, by the way, talking about the original work that she became involved with the cattle mutilations,
Yeah.
that the cattle were being taken up into craft. They could actually occasionally uh, see that actually happening. The sheriff or
Yeah.
somebody would happening. So apparently, you can take up all the whole race of people into one of these, orbs that are apparently
Yeah.
are been embedded underground and have been there for thousands of years. So many things are possible that we would not ordinarily think about or imagine in terms of
Yeah.
tinkering with us in order to uh, relate to the Earth as a laboratory. Apparently, many extraterrestrial races uh, think of Earth as a exquisite laboratory where many different races have been brought here and incarnated uh, with all the with all the biological tinkering of biological immortals, apparently, like Enlil, and so forth, as I understand it, who is a daily close friend of Elena Danan's. If anybody's listened to Elena Danan, I'm sorry, Enki. Enlil's the bad one.
Mhm.
Enki, so he's an immortal apparently, and Elena goes and hangs out with him. And there are a number of immortals involved with what she's been sharing with the world. So if anybody would like to hear more of what she has to share, she has come and gone from the earth before, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a whole very unique and amazing story of how she was saved by some ETs from the Greys that were abducting her. And then she was reintroduced to her past and her purpose to serve here on the earth to help bring humanity up to speed about how we're very on our way, rapidly moving towards an interactive existence with multiple extraterrestrial races that are collaborating together,
Yeah.
that are doing what they can to help us without interfering too much.
Yeah, they've been here a long time helping out and behind the scenes. And I kind of have the feeling that it's going to be more stuff happening in front of the curtain from now on. I think
Yes,
that's coming.
that's definitely happening now.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
yeah, we're seeing that there are. You talked also about Emery Smith. He was told that he was going to be introduced to an extraterrestrial. Maybe speak to that for a little bit because it sounded interesting.
yes, if any of you will go back to the beginnings of David Wilcock's interviews for Cosmic Disclosure, before David left uh, Gaia Television, he was doing the program Cosmic Disclosure, which Emery Smith now uh, is the interviewer. Emery was had been encouraged over a period of about 10 years by David to come forward and share his experiences. So Emery finally came forward, and this was a number of years ago. And one of the stories that Emery shared was when he was working at the laboratories east of Albuquerque in these deep underground laboratories that were protected by the United States Army. They were working with extraterrestrials. But the first few years that he was there, he was just in training to be a sort of a doctor, to be able to work with these extraterrestrial tissue samples in a very compartmentalized way, probably 30 or 40 floors down below the desert floor. And at one point, because Emery had been very circumspect, he had not told anybody on the outside, any of his girlfriends or his family, about the work that he was doing, which was top secret. And some of the people that he was working with came to him and said, Emery, you've been, you've been well behaved. we
Yeah.
He'd been introduced to lighter anti-gravity spacecraft, but he hadn't met any ETs as of yet. He'd been working on their tissue samples, but so he knew well that he was working on extraterrestrial concerns and that they were there in the laboratory. He just hadn't met any of them. And they said to Emery, well, tomorrow, since you've been so reliable, we're going to introduce you to your first ET. So so Emery came up with 150 questions he wanted to ask this ET. And this is an interdimensional ET, as I recall it. And so the next day came, and this ET appeared in the lab room where he usually would work by himself on these tissue samples. And immediately, Emery felt merged with this ET, like there was only one of them, because the ET was very powerful. He had appeared out of nowhere, as I recall, and Emery and he in this telesomatic, it's a somatic telepathy where you feel with every cell and atom and molecule of your body that you're merged with the other person. Imagine that. And so both both people, they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, that telepathy is worth a million words, because you can think about and feel and sense a million different things together without having to utter a word.
Yeah.
So the mutual understanding is extraordinary in telepathy, just even one on one. Imagine what it would be with 8 billion human beings on this planet. And wow, that would be
Yeah.
extraordinary. And that is something that is definitely possible, because there are extraterrestrial races. And this particular extraterrestrial told Emery, said, well, we live, there's billions of us, and you may think that we're millions of years in advance of you, I'm sorry, but you're like our children. We, just like you all care about your children and love your children, we've been tinkering with you for millions of years, hundreds of millions of years even. And we're very proud of you. We think that you're really going to be great. And so Emery is experiencing this telepathy, and he feels so merged and so melted in this, what he considered love, or what he called love, that he could barely stay standing. And there are some instances where ETs appeared to very highly, rigorously trained military people, uh, and they started experiencing this telesomatic unity, and they just fell unconscious and didn't wake up for 2 days. So the fact that Emery could stay conscious, and he said, I just felt like melting. I could barely stay standing. The love was so powerful. The communion was just amazing. And the ET answered his 150 questions in under a second, just transmitted the answers to all the questions. And then he said, "Look, you're like our, we love you. We're very proud of you. You're like our children. We've been tinkering with you for a long time.
Long
And
time.
please know that, in our race, we have billions of people and we're all in unity consciousness like you and I are in right now. And as a result, our neurophysiological capacities and psychological capacities are such that it looks like we're a million years in advance of you, but it's because of our being in unity consciousness as a people that we're very interested in you all experiencing the joys of being one, awake as one, and many, without losing your individuality. In fact, each of us in our culture are more incomparably unique than you all in your culture. So merging and becoming one consciousness does not erase your uniqueness as an individual. In fact, it extremely enhances that. So that not only are you vastly more intelligent and able to make sense of far more, you're able to communicate instantaneously in great depth and in detail with anyone else in your species or anyone else who can be telesomatic with you. And there are many, many extraterrestrial species which are highly telesomatic.
Yeah, yeah. That's I see also that we are at the bottom of the hour here. For those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Sperry Andrews, and we are talking about unity consciousness and how to achieve it. What can we do to advance ourselves up the spiritual ladder, so to speak? And there are probably people out there that would like to surf the internet while they're listening. Maybe, Sperry, you could mention where they can. Uh, you wrote a book, and there's a website where maybe mention this so people can. I did put it in the chat room at the very beginning. There are some links I put in there, so you can go there or get it also. But mention it anyway, if you would, Sperry.
Thank you. Yes. Well, you can go to my institute. It's been around for over 30 years. I formed it uh, before I was going to speak at the United Nations in 1992. Uh, so it was also true that other researchers were always asking me for reprints of these in-depth 30, 50-page studies, and it was getting very expensive to make photocopies and send them to people. So I put everything online. So when you go to my website, Connection Institute, all one word, connection is singular, connectioninstitute.org, you'll find a lot of links to papers and recordings, presentations of our work at the Institute, uh, very in-depth scientific research that have to do with remote viewing, being able to be telepathic with people on the other side of the planet or whatever. People recordings of people entering into and sharing a commonly sensed consciousness on YouTube. Many publications of our presentations at scientific conferences. 30, 40, 50-page papers. My presentations at UC Berkeley, for example, in the Foundations of Mind Conference 1 and 2, uh, and many, many other. There's an well, you have the opportunity to buy an e-magazine publication. It's over 220 some odd pages, full color, that will give you one of the articles that I presented in North Carolina at a conference there. And it will also has a 25-page booklet that explains how to go into unity consciousness with your friends and neighbors and coworkers.
Yeah,
It's like a pop out. You can click on it
yeah,
and send it around to your friends. And
yeah,
so if you buy that for $3.99, very inexpensive for what was 3 months of work just to put that in color and make a book out of it, Karen Elkins, who is a wonderful, wonderful lady who's had the Science to Sage magazine for many years.
Yeah,
Um, has interviewed many of all the top people in the consciousness movement.
that's
Um,
good.
yes.
And then,
So,
yeah, I went to and I had a look at that 224, I think you said, page booklet, and guests send me books every so often, and sometimes I don't get to read all of it. But I'll tell you this one, this is pearls in it. There is education in this. So this one, I'm gonna get to the last page on before I'm done because
wow.
there's good stuff in there. If I wore a hat, I will take it off for you. Anyway,
Wonderful.
yeah, you talked also a little bit about telepathy here, and that is just an incredible concept. Some of people are better at it. They got different names for it. Intuition is one, and but the each person have more or less of this awareness. How do you think we can increase our awareness to a more higher developed intuition or psychic abilities or unity consciousness? What should we do? Nuts and bolts for ourselves.
Well, I know this may interlace with what you were going to ask me about coming from the eighth dimension.
Yeah.
Uh, in the eighth dimension, I was like a point of unique consciousness with other points of unique consciousness. We didn't have physical bodies or organs, so to speak. We didn't need to eat. We were just in this state of each being incomparably unique in some insightful way every moment, each one of us. And then we would be sharing our incomparable uniqueness with one another telesomatically. Uh, look up the word telesomatic, by the way. That's an interesting word. Uh, and so I heard this sort of disembodied voice say to us, we're looking for people that might be willing to come to planet Earth to help raise the consciousness, collective consciousness of humanity, or didn't say humanity, just said the collective consciousness. And would any of you be interested? And I very naively, it was like I was like a in this realm that I was in, I was like a little baby practically, but nonetheless, you're like highly awake and aware and vital. Uh, and it was it was absolutely heavenly. If you want to, everybody can imagine the heavenliness could be amazing. And it was so joyful and so thrilling to just be awake in this way. There was no possibility of suffering, no possibility of uh,
What we would call negativity.
no possibility of negativity whatsoever, no conflict of any kind. And so it was very easy for me in a very naive way to just say, oh yeah, sure, I'll go there, having no idea how long that it might take to be here on this planet Earth. And and so by agreeing, this I was kind of sucked away without even, not that I was ever aware of having any choice or further choice about it. Took birth as a human baby in my human mother's womb, uh, which I have actual conscious recall of being in her womb. And I started a human life here. At the age of 4, I had a near death experience where I went back to this void like awakeness. There was no me, there was just consciousness without any object, where the mind is completely and utterly silent. There was no form, no Sperry. And that lasted for about 7 hours. A tree had fallen on me while I was playing Zorro to try to save the day because my mother's father and mother had committed suicide 2 years apart, and I felt the day needed saving. So I was practicing being Zorro, having watching those old black and white TV programs. So
I
I was
remember
playing
that.
a tree and got out on this branch. I'd never been out on a branch, on this fallen over tree that had I was very fascinated with. And this particular day, I went out there, the whole tree had fallen over, and I just barely got up on top of the trunk, which was as tall as I was, and began to crawl out on this 20-foot long, 10-inch wide branch. And I said, Zorro wouldn't crawl, for heaven's sakes. I'll have to stand up and, walk or run out on this branch. So I wasn't going to run, but I would very slowly, gingerly walk, one step at a time. And I noticed over the stone wall, my this girl that was my age, my neighbor, who we called Lamsey Woolsey. We both had curly blonde hair. And I said, oh my God, Lamsey Woolsey's going to look over here. I had uh, a dish towel pushed down my neck and a stick with some chalk tied on the end with some kite string I had and was making Z's on things. And I said, oh, Lamsey Woolsey's going to look over here and she's going to realize that I have this dual identity, and I felt like my entire life was made in that moment. I'm going to be like Zorro. I'm going to save the day. Lamsey Woolsey's going to realize that I'm Zorro. Oh my goodness, how great could it possibly be, right? So at that moment, the branch broke. It like cracked and went down about a half an inch. And instinctively, I knew that I was going to fall. And I closed my eyes to try to figure out, well, what would Zorro do under these circumstances? And I saw looked like pears and apples and lemons spinning around like in one of those one-armed bandits, which I'd never seen before, but that was how I associate with it. And it kind of stopped at what Zorro would do would be to catch a hold of the branch as I fell, which I was definitely going to fall, and my downward momentum, my weight of my body would carry me on to the next rooftop and I would continue on to Bizarro. But that's not what happened. I swung under the branch like I imagined, and then this 20-foot long, 10-inch wide branch came down on top of my heart and took me out for 7 hours.
Wow.
So when I was out, my mind was completely silent. There was no suffering at all. I didn't know what had happened to my physical body. But when I came back 7 hours later into my 4-year-old little boy's body, I tried to ask, why would Zorro have that happen to him? And before I could finish asking, I was shown how the whole of nature oscillated in and out of formlessness. That was how nature evolved and matured and grew, and how we were growing and maturing and evolving. And so I thought, was really an amazing experience to experience that. And I just went like, oh, wow, okay. And so that really was a, a very significant step in my beginning to integrate my eighth dimensional experience of unity consciousness with the whole
Yeah.
of the cosmos, with the whole cosmos, mind you, with what it would be to human being with other human beings and with the whole cosmos as a human being on planet Earth, as a way to understand how to talk about this and share this way of being with my mother and father and brother and sister, the older sister, younger brother. And nobody knew what I was talking about. My mother would say, go get a psychologist, go talk to somebody else. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
And my father was too conservative. He couldn't talk to him about it. He was a very sweet man. Both of them were very lovely people, but they were emotionally unavailable to some extent.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much isolated, ironically, with this sense of being one with everyone, and yet no one to feel that with and explore that with. So the first 30 years of my life were very difficult. I tried eating five or six hamburgers to dumb myself down at one point. And that didn't work. I just felt terribly ill. It was awful. So
Yeah.
then uh, meditation was the only thing that really would help me. And I eventually, I didn't know why I was suffering so much. I just was suffering horribly, like everything you could possibly suffer as a human being. And through meditation, I got to that silent mindedness, and I could ask then, why am I suffering so much? And I was shown, well, this is the only way that you can learn to help other humans, because unless you suffer what they're suffering, you don't know what they're suffering, and you don't know how you don't know how to
Yeah.
help
It's
them
better.
suffer that. And so
Yeah.
I learned how to meditate. I learned how to bring people into meditative states with me so we could be no mind, no self. Uh, as you know, the Dalai Lama not long ago said it's not about getting rid of the self, it's about realizing there was no self to begin with. And many, many, whether it's Shankara or Gautama Buddha or Lao Tzu or you name it, they all have said there is no self. The Hindus say we come from a void, Sat Purusha, which is the supreme void, and it takes the form of Purusha, which is a void that can break down into cause and effect. So the whole world that we experience as human beings is this world of cause and effect. We feel like we can cause and effect and have what we want or what we need. And so we get very caught up in trying to cause an effect that we want. And ironically, until we become thoughtless and unidentified with a self, can we are we capable of uniting cause and effect so that they work together in a synergy, and by not even asking for a better world, we attract that better world simply by being thoughtless and
Mhm.
open to everything in a more integrated way, where we're not dividing it up into me and you and I want this and you want that, and I don't want that today, I want this today. I don't want that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the confusion that comes from being identified with a very piecemeal, you know, this mindset, this want, this need, this fear, this
Yeah.
confusion, broken up into all these pieces and parts. We're lost together. As 8 billion people today, we're lost in the forest uh, without a clue at this point.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
be awake and aware together, we're going to be facing up with other people who are clueless, who are tortured. They don't feel in control. They can't trust us to help them. So I needed to learn to be able to merge with people so they were entered into a commonly sensed consciousness with me, and they were completely trusting. They didn't
Yeah.
have any fear with me. And I could see how people needed to be free of fear. And even then, it would only last very momentarily as long as they were with me. So then I set out at the age of 32, after multiple experiences of what I just described, is how can I how can I make it available for free to tens of thousands of people in many countries around the world to practice this simple step into awareness of awareness, which had taken me about
Yeah.
20 years of contemplation to realize that we could do this through awareness of awareness. And
Hmm.
it was not easy sailing, because I would go into a company that was working together, a group of, say, like 20 people, and they were structured in the way they worked together, like who's the leader, what do we all believe, who knows more than who. And when they would go into unity consciousness, they would see that the leader wasn't as you
Perfect.
as, res- as respectful or respecting or awake as now they were as a group. And so they would lose respect for the leader, and the whole organization would fall apart. So it
Um,
would destroy an organization. And I was working with the World Business Academy at the time in New York City. And so I was learning about how not to destroy groups of people in their organizations. And I'll just tell this one last story before we move on. But I told them about what I was doing, and they said, "Well, Sperry, there's 18 of us in the steering committee for the New York chapter of the World Business Academy, which was started by Willis Harman from the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And we can't seem to agree on anything, Sperry. And we like what you said about being able to come to a commonly sensed understanding. Would you come in and teach us to do that?" And I'd say, "Yeah, sure, I will." And so I came in, and for the first hour, I showed them how to be aware of awareness. So in an hour, we all became aware of awareness as 18 people, and it was absolutely blissful and beautiful, like it was in the eighth dimension. Maybe not quite as much, but at least to some extent. And then I turned to the chairman of the group and I said, "Well, okay, so now that we're here, uh, what is it that you're having trouble with agreeing on?" And he looked around to everybody in the group with a smile on his face, and they were all smiling back at him. And he said, "I think I can speak for all of us. We don't have a problem anymore. Thank you, Sperry." So
oh, really?
that's how simple the solution is. It's really very, very simple. And most people haven't grokked, if you know the word grok, people haven't grokked how simple it really is to get on the same page, to get on the same wavelength together. Everybody's
Yeah,
kind of like, "I don't want to listen to you. I want you to listen to me," kind of thing.
yeah,
And
oh,
I'm
yeah.
dominant. I have a better way of doing it, and you should listen to me. I have more money, or I look better, or whatever it is. It's completely insane. Humanity is, uh,
Yeah,
pretty crazy
yeah,
and fragmented.
yeah. What you were talking about, the void and where things are, it brings me to a thought about what is the universe? Is it all in our head or is it out there? Or because I've been watching, there's a physicist named James Gates, and he says that when we look deep in the equations explaining the fundamental particles of the fabric of space, like protons, electrons, and so on, and down all the way down to omegons, when these particles show up on the blackboard, they show up with computer language. It just shows up because they did not put it there. It just shows up. So if there's computer language, there's got to be a computer somewhere. Computers create artificial structuring. Are we part of that artificial structure? Is there anything out there, or is it all happening in our head as being projected so we think it exists? Well, that's a deep one.
I would say it's both and, Augie, and let me explain that. So Dr. Beekler and Dr. James E. Beekler, Beichler, he taught physics at the university level for over 35 years. He's published 70 papers, presented at conferences. He did his dissertation for his PhD in Einstein. He is a scientific historian as well as a theoretical physicist. I would say the finest theoretical physicists that I have met and gotten to know, and I've deliberately gotten to know all of them pretty much. And he he also had a near-death experience, which I think is very enlightening. Anybody who's had an NDE uh, can make sense of the totality in a more undivided way through the silent mind. of contemplative meditative awakeness. It's said in the East for thousands of years that awakeness is the only constant in the whole of consciousness. It's like a mirror. They actually use that the concept of a mirror as representing awakeness. So when we step in front of a mirror, the mirror receives and reflects us. The mirror has no image of its own. It has no thoughts of its own, but it is receiving and reflecting what's in front of it. Well, in a way, each of us is like is awakeness. We are receiving and reflecting exactly like a mirror. But since we are each incomparably unique every single moment, that receptive, reflective process, being mirror like, is not divided by space or time. It is a spaceless, timeless, fundamental constant in physics, which most of physicists, even with Einstein, Ernst Mach was a very conservative physicist, said, well, I will not accept your theory, Albert, if you make the fourth dimension a dimension of space. It has to be a dimension of time, because the fourth dimension of space, we don't know how to measure it yet.
Yeah.
Even though James Clerk Maxwell came up with the four-dimensional quaternions, James Clerk Maxwell conceived of the complexity of electromagnetic fluctuations, if all of you know that. The fourth dimension of space for James Clerk Maxwell was essential for these fluctuations to have a place to occur. So also William Clifford, who died quite early, but was a brilliant, brilliant physicist, and he also spoke of this and pointed to it. Kaluza and Klein were top physicists who pointed to this fourth dimension of space as well. Even Louis de Broglie, I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but he's the one that said that the particles were also waves, and waves were also could be particles, and they could transition from particles to waves back and forth in the double slit experiment. But Ernst Mach, very tough guy, and he said, nope, that's it. We're not having the fourth dimension be a dimension of space. So, like Jim Beekler and I, in our model that we've converged on together, I showed him about how what is dimensionless is fundamental to every single geometric point in three dimensions. So if you think of three dimensions as the fluctuation of coordinate locations that are continually changing their relationship in space over time, what is actually going on there at one level is that dimensionless points are changing their location in relationship to each other, because three-dimensional objects are the relationship of dimensionless points to each other in the three-dimensional. Eighth dimension is the relationship of 8 points constantly fluctuating together. It's a much more refined, much more transparent, telesomatic, aware way of being. It's said that the sixth dimension is the first dimension where everything is very heavenly and there's no conflict or negativity. Still in the fifth dimension, there's still some negativity there. So we won't go into all that, but the multidimensionality of consciousness has a understandable structure as to how the observer is able to unite it all continuously, moment after moment, as a timeless, spaceless unity that is experienced as incomparably unique every moment. Okay, so to answer the question, Aage, if we were all to be awake as one, or any one of us to be awake, for example, we can sense that we are indivisible from everyone and everything. The whole is in every one of us. We're in the whole, and the whole is in every one of us. It's both and. So then the reason for that is that the points that make up three dimension share a single polar point in what is called the fourth dimension of space, which I've been talking about. And when every single dimensionless point in 3D shares a single polar point in 4D, that fourth dimensional point is omnipresent throughout everything that we know of in 3D. So even though we have the vastness of our universe as a spatial temporal dependent phenomena, we are also made up of an infinite, countless number of dimensionless points to have a three-dimensional body. And so our dimensionless points are indivisible from all other dimensionless points. And we can have the capacity, each of us individually and all of us together, even more so, to be able to embody and localize the non-local universe through, through is the word, through every dimensionless point in our bodies, hearts, and minds.
Okay,
And
so it is.
understand what is going on in this cosmos with each other or just by ourselves alone individually. And so, yes, in an absolute direct way, we are participating in the recreation of creation by how we pay attention and what we pay attention and how well we pay attention.
Yeah, so that is all consciousness then.
That is all consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of, at my level anyway, that explains it. It's not necessarily just nuts and bolts, but nuts and bolts are also made from consciousness. So there we
Let's
go.
look at something that everybody would relate to is that if we take away all the empty space in an atom, for example, we know, most everybody has heard this before, 99% of that space is empty space. If we were to take away all the empty space in us, let's say in me, I would probably be invisible. I would be a little pile of what looked like maybe like some sand grains or something. These
Yeah,
so-called particles, which are really just wavicles. They're they get their energetic and point-centered properties from being a vibration of the void.
yeah. It's fluctuating energy. There you go.
Yeah, the void is that which is not a thing, that which is space, that which is this extension of length, width, and depth vibrating in relationship to each other, can take the forms of particles. They can appear on the screen, as you're saying, where they weren't placed there. The ETs can actually place stuff on the screen in front of us and say, okay, now think about that. And they could
Yeah,
put ideas into our and thoughts into our mind. There's actual technology. A friend of mine came up with this device
yeah. I
that
tell you though,
could allow congenitally deaf people to hear. And he went to the US Patent Office and he demonstrated this device to the patent clerk, who they deliberately had chosen as someone who had been congenitally deaf since birth. And and it vibrated the skeletal structure of the patent clerk, and they were able to hear for the first time in their life.
mhm, yeah.
The
And
U.S.
we have 1 minute left. That's all
Okay,
we
all
have.
right.
Let people know where they can get a hold of you again. And if you want to, you could also give out your email address if you want to get people in touch with you. Sometimes that
Yeah.
there are people out
I
there
hope
that need
you
some help.
all, I hope you all buy the book for $3.99. I think you'll be very happy and amazed by that. There's some film ideas in that are at the back are amazing that can shift the whole of humanity. Uh, there's a 5-year project, $30 million project. You can learn about that. Okay, so just go to connectioninstitute.org. You can, if you want, connection is singular, connectioninstitute.org, and you can look me up there and send me an email. My email is there on the site. So if you really want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me. Thank you so
That's
much,
good.
Aage.
That's good. Yeah, this has been quite an education again. So I loved it. All right, we are down to the end of the show here. So, for the listeners out there, thank you very much for being with us. And next week, we'll be back. And until then, be good to each other.